Hi everyone. Yesterday I came across an Instagram post that I thought was interesting because I really wasn't sure of the answer, but I wanted to do my own independent research. The article on Instagram stated how quality companies pay dividends and they're typically less risky and they provide better returns. Well, I guess that could be the case, but I didn't believe so based on some other information I had. Anyway, I went to Yahoo Finance and I pulled two ETFs under some certain criteria. I wanted them to be at least 10 years old because I wanted them to go through a traditional credit cycle, and I also wanted to use an ETF for the data because it also adjusts for dividends. Obviously that's a big component of the VIG, which is Vanguard's appreciation dividend index. Both of these indices went back all the way to 2006, so we found the dip in 2008, we had the dip in 2011, 2016, 2018, a little bit in 2019, and then also in early 2020. So I thought it would be two good ETFs to compare side by side and look at the data and see, are dividend stocks really that much more valuable? Because in my opinion, it really shouldn't ever matter except for total returns, which would be dividends and gains. Particularly if it's shielded in a tax advantage account like a Roth IRA, you don't have to worry about qualified versus unqualified dividend status. So anyway, let's get into the data. Notice we have all the way back to May of 2006, and all I did was simply go back and count the months and do a rate calculation, which is a yield calculation based on how many months it's taken. If you're curious about the formula here, it's simply grabbing how many months has elapsed, zero payment, and then you have a negative present value, and then you find the future value, you lock it with an absolute, and then just drag it all the way to the top, multiply by 12 to annualize. And then I also wanted to look at it from a compounding approach, and the best way I found is to say, let's take a static number of investment, let's say $100, just like someone's putting $100 in a 401k every month. And then we buy new shares, we have a cumulative amount of shares, and then we have a cumulative value for that portfolio. And I'll get to that chart a little later. So we bring it all the way down here, and the simple average for the VIG, which is the dividend portfolio, is 9.98, which is pretty strong. And the simple average for the SPY, which is the S&P500 ETF, is 10.58, which is extremely good. And similarly, for the compounded returns, you have 10.12 for the dividend ETF and 10.62 for the SPY or the S&P 500 ETF. Both very strong. I'd be tickled if I had a consistent 10% return over a long period of time. It's my biased opinion that we're at a top of the cycle, so these yields are probably going to be a little artificially high, but the aggregate difference will still be very similar. Roughly high level looks like half a point, 60 basis points. Looks like a premium for S&P would outperform dividend stocks. I tend to see things better in tables and charts, so let's look at these just to get a better comparison. So in this scenario we have, send that to the front. Okay, we have the total appreciation to the S&P 500 comparison. The SPY, which is SP500, is in the bars, and then the blue line is VIG. And notice there's not very much difference between the two. Starting around 2016, there appeared to be a little bit of premium in the S&P General ETF, whereas dividends are a little bit higher during the recession, but a fairly nominal value over time. Then we look at the same data from a static pool approach, which means if I purchased it in any given month, what would those returns like going forward? Again, similar results because it's the same data. Okay, and then I wanted to actually look at the portfolio balances because that's probably what most people would be looking at because they're looking at their retirement funds or want to see growth. Well, I have a simple approach here to take $100 a month and invest it into each pool and then compare them over a 14-year run because that's to the extent that the ETF was established. Notice again that around the 2014-2018 vintage that the SPY, the S&P ETF, outperformed the dividends. So I think we can kind of put this to bed that, we've looked at a 14-year cycle that's probably included at least two dips in the market, a pretty dramatic one in 2008. I don't see any evidence that there should be favorability towards dividend stocks at all. If anything, I think maybe grabbing the broader S&P is probably a better overall total return. Please leave your comments in there and tell me if you agree or disagree, or why you believe that there is some advantage to dividends. Thanks. Please like and subscribe.